And here it is, the new Lamborghini Temerario. I'll show it to you right away from my favorite angle, this 3/4 view. Look at it, it's really beautiful. It evolves. What are the style concepts of Lamborghini? It brings them into a new dimension, taking cues in quotes from what is a completely new universe, that of the Revuelto, that first rewrote what are the concepts of the technical evolution of a Lamborghini. Clearly here, they have been reinterpreted in a slightly lower segment that goes to replace that of the Huracan, which proudly for so many years, along with the Gallardo, carried the V10 engine. But having arrived at a certain point in Lamborghini, they decided to evolve what was an extraordinary naturally aspirated engine, certainly a beautiful engine, into a new V8 turbo power plant, which is there. You see it on that little cart, an extraordinary 10,000 RPM object. Like a motorcycle. Actually, it could run up to 11,000 RPM, but the guys in Lamborghini have decided to stay conservative on what is the performance of a 200 horsepower liter engine, a 4,000 displacement engine that is combined in a hybrid scheme that is inspired by that of the V12, precisely in that possibility of combining the work of a V8 engine with 3 electric motors, 2 on the front axle, that also clearly work to give torque vectoring as well as ensure all-wheel drive, which is typical of Lamborghinis, plus another rear engine that allows this car to be hybrid homologated, with the dubious advantages also with regard to the dynamic aspects, because if it is true that it increases the weight, we are at 1,715 kilos, so the car is not really that light, but in fact you are able to trigger all those movements starting precisely from the torque vectoring on the front axle that allow the car to lengthen the deck, therefore in fact to generate phenomena that allow the driving dynamics to be much smoother, much more linear than what you could have without the use of this technology. In fact, you take home a car that is much faster than the previous one, precisely with all the advantages also of the hybrid homologation that willy-nilly, unfortunately, also supercar manufacturers have to chase just for homologation issues. So in fact, the moment you are forced to do it, then you also try to play it in your favor. Let's go to see what it looks like from an aesthetic point of view. Clearly compared to the Revuelto disappears. The hood here in the front that went up to the edge of the car is introduced a bumper a little bit more traditional. This just to differentiate also the style, but it always remains that very sharp, very aggressive, but at the same time elegant, that has been developed by Lamborghini style center, but without giving up all the aerodynamic elements that make the difference, like this beautiful lower carbon splitter, like this wing in the side that directs the flow towards the side, and then so many elements like this hexagonal LED tribute clearly to the Countach, and it has all the design of a Lamborghini. However, you see it perforated, so technical element that integrates right inside another technical element that blows air inside the radiators that then go to manage the temperatures. More than anything, I would say, of the fiery spirits of this extraordinary engine that takes place in this new Lamborghini. Clearly, there are all the driving aid systems level 2. You see it through these cameras in front here. Clearly, the distance, the super assisted car in every respect, you can definitely say it is a modern object from this point of view, but it is also a car that, precisely despite being a strong evolution in terms of style, is also an object that clearly speaks of Lamborghini. 4 meters and 68 in length, 2 meters and 66 in wheelbase, so it grows 40 millimeters compared to the past. It is remarkable the difference both in length and in value of wheelbase. Actually, the weight can get to 1,690 kilos with the lightened package that allows you to have a bang of elements, lightened or otherwise improved elements, both from an aerodynamic point of view or even in a performance key. So in fact, it is not yet an Esteo nor a Performante, but we already start to have something more than a basic Temerario. I show you also the exhaust. Look how nice it looks. On the lightened version, it can be mounted in titanium. So there are very important evolutions as regards also precisely to the technical part from the very beginning. Very nice, this element, the optical group that takes up the LED in the front. Always the concept of the hexagon reinterpreted. with these three Y-shaped segments in the inner part. And then an element of a certainly very cool style, you see it here, is the rear wheel, a little bit in motorcycle style, in that it shows the grit that this engine can deliver. It is certainly a very interesting theme, that of the wheel exposed. Clearly, it is not the first time that is seen in the automotive universe. You tell me in the past, in the 70s, there is some important stuff in this respect. But I would say that the reinterpretation of the Lamborghini style center from this point of view is really, really well done. I show you also the aerodynamics of the car. Look at these flow deviations in the part below that serve to increase the downforce, precisely because in a Lamborghini have decided to, especially for these standard variants, to work much more in the downforce than in the upforce. This is to generate that downforce that grows by 103% compared to the Huracan. So there is an abysmal difference, with the cooling capacity improved by 50%. A very noticeable difference that travels hand in hand with a technique that clearly has to find a way to ground these 920 horsepower. I remind you 800 generated by the heat engine back here, which actually is also kept at bay. 325 and 30 the tire, 4-piston caliper, clearly carboceramic disc in the rear. Now I'll show you what the Bridgestone Potenza Sport is shoehorned onto in the front instead. 255, 35 and 20, so an inch less than the rear, with a very noticeable caliper. You see 10 pistons with a disc that soars past the 400 millimeters. The design here of the front is taken up. It is very reminiscent of that of the Huracan. Even though of the Huracan in this car, there is not a single bolt. You can only make the dimensional differences. So much so that in this body made of aluminum clearly carries over the basic aesthetic concept, the realization. But really there are so many elements both in the construction that I will later show you in another video. Both of the construction of the chassis, front and rear, and the construction of the body itself, which really make a difference from the past, precisely because the car is much more spacious. It can accommodate up to 2 meters in height, thanks to an increase of 34 millimeters of space in terms of the vertical. Clearly also an increase in space as far as the longitudinal part. So there is much more space even between the seat and the pedals, if you will, to which you also add, you see it, a little space back here, which is very useful, certainly to carry, for example, the gym bag, or in any case to represent a compartment that can be used every day. Captivating the air intake here in the side clearly integrates with the side design of the car. We have another one above here. You see a little bit how the engine cooling is developed. On this side we have the fuel cap, while on the other side we have the intake charging station that will actually be the saddest outlet on earth, considering that no one will use that socket clearly to recharge the car. The engine is not exposed, or rather it is exposed but only partially. You see it because unlike the aspirated, there are technical elements that, yes, they can be sexy, but actually, as you see here in the upper part, let's say there are some nicer things here, so they decided to cover it just because the V is hot. So there is a whole structural part that makes it difficult to create an aesthetic and actually nice element, so they made a cover anyway, technical from his point of view. But I actually have to say that this is one of the most beautiful engines I had ever seen as a realization, with precisely this V8 90-degree V that uses aluminum castings that are pseudo-inspired by those in the world of Ducati. The supplier of the crankcase is the same, so there is a kind of partnership between what is the universe of the cousin motorcycle manufacturer within the Audi group, Volkswagen Audi of course. But here clearly there is a completely Lamborghini design that goes to work on this V8 flat shaft with some very interesting features, because it's an engine designed to be super quadro, so 90 in bore, 78 and 5 for the stroke. Weighs 240 pounds. Keep in mind that the turbines have a diameter of 64 millimeters. Look at that piece, made by IHI, with a capacity to turn up to 164,000 revolutions. 164,000 revolutions. Clearly they are counter-rotating, so if one turns left, the other turns right, clearly, so they compensate their movements one with the other. and then they go to push inside the combustion chambers of this remarkable engine that, as a design, is inspired a little bit to the past. You see, it is very beautiful, but at the same time then it also goes to integrate to an 8-speed transverse gearbox made by the former Graziano in Turin, that also ensures a perfect integration with the electric motor placed in P1. So between the heat engine and the gearbox, the battery is made with lithium Legion cells and arranged here in the center. In the central tunnel, allows you to go to optimize what the distribution of mass is, and also allows you to go to optimize what is the space inside the cockpit, precisely with a kind of compartment in the rear, more space in longitudinal terms, also in terms of height. With regard to materials, human leather, indeed, very human. I dare say both with regard to the central part, that the upper part, very soft, that the low part all covered in leather, really very nice with the carbon fiber that goes to make the finishes. And then I am proud, being Vicentino, also to note the presence of the audio system of Sonus Faber that arrives also on Lamborghini after having seen it on Maserati. So in fact, being a high-end company with regard to the realization of audio systems, obviously also works with companies that are at the top with regard to the part of making cars. The interiors are clearly inspired by those of Revuelto. For what I was telling you, that yes, the car starts from a blank sheet of paper, but in fact some squares were already drawn on it, cantilevered instrumentation with technical elements in view. You see them, these torque screws that are exposed are left just to point out the technicality of the object multifunction steering wheel. With drift mode, you see it can be activated directly from the steering wheel. You go to intervene on the work of the front engines, to torque vectoring or all-wheel drive, plus clearly the rear powertrain to go and generate together with the differential that I'm told is open, but with the bi-brake a little bit like the McLaren for the distribution of torque between the right and the left wheel. You go and generate drift modes that can allow you to have a cleaner ride, and clearly to go and orchestrate even better what the work of the front motors of the rear ones given, considering that there is not a physical connection between the front axle, the rear one, but there is an electronic connection. So these modes allow you to go and work more. A precise on what can be a potential dynamic of the car, going precisely to work on all the engines, on the work of the electronically controlled suspensions that work on double triangle, double wishbone, both front and rear, precisely adjustable in the intensity of work with their shock absorber. Except on board, I show you how it is made inside a great piece of design. You see it with the tongue that tends to descend here, the part of the central tunnel, a little bit Martian, looks alien what it may look like. This air intake in the center is definitely inspired by the movie universe. Very nice. I must say, a beautiful inspiration with this vertically mounted display that gives way at the bottom to a little mat that I can imagine is also the charging area for the phone as the F rises. The safety, you can clearly start the engine from here. You can select the gears more from here. Instead, we can go to select all those that are the different driving modes, including also the adaptive cruise control, the activation and deactivation of the electric part, and then, or however, the forcing, let's say, of the electric part, or the mode a little bit more racing. That's certainly the one that I prefer. And then precisely here in front, we have a beautiful instrumentation. As I told you, mounted overhanging is really very good and goes to assist the presence of these three screens, including one dedicated to the passenger front with obviously dedicated information regarding the performance, small drawer in the front, and upholstery up here in leather. I have to say that this definitely a good news for basketball players, for football players, for all those who will want to buy this car but are a little bit taller. Exactly as in my case, maybe they are also a little bit more corpulent as I can be. I have to say that inside this car I am really very comfortable and greatly improved, both compared to the Gaillard, obviously, but also compared to the Huracan. And inside this iron, I am there to the great work by the engineers of Lamborghini to allow this piece of aluminum, both in terms of the body and in terms of the engine. So super piece of aluminum with a lot of work behind it to go and make precisely a much more performance car, much more efficient, considerably more spacious inside, and clearly, at least according to the indications of the Lamborghini technicians, much faster compared to everything we have known previously with the V10 engine, and clearly in line with the evolutionary process that there has been in the realization of the Revuelto, that precisely it too has changed a lot compared to the previous Aventador and is stunning in terms of performance. But also stage presence, I am very curious to hear it fired up. I'm very curious to try it on the road. I'm very curious clearly to try it on the track. I'm very curious to appreciate the qualities of that wonderful engine that is on that stand right now. Indeed, Lamborghini, if you have one to give me, I'm doing the new office, so I gladly expose it. Having said that, joking a sidecar, however, really very nice. We will find out the price in a few months. And I'm also curious precisely to see what differences there will be with the previous Huracan. Also how it will evolve in the course of its history. This model that was designed entirely within the walls of Sant'Agata is made inside the walls of Sant'Agata and precisely is marketed instead all over the world. You are considered that this car, also thanks to the hybrid, will be able to comply with all the anti-pollution regulations possible, imaginable with This Is Everything. Congratulations Lamborghini, long live the passion for cars and full gas. As so, always. Ciao!